planting seeds through the internet. Since that's kind of the new communication tool for the world, that's where this is being disseminated. So this is the classroom. This is the inspiration for you. This is the guidance to discuss identity, why we're not Hispanic or Latino, to discuss the basic heritage of our people, going back to the Olmecs and talking about the Mayas and talking about the Mexica and talking about Tezcatlipoca.
My name is Nican Tlaca, Director of the Mexica Movement, Nican Tlaca Nation. Today we're going to do a series of dialogues on different issues and topics. One being who we are as the Nican Tlaca people, why we're not Hispanic, not Latino, not Latinx, and hopefully you gain some knowledge, some awareness. Our founder, Olin Tezcatlipoca, is also going to talk about the process of creating the Mexica movement, the process of writing the Mexica handbook, the process of creating all this material that eventually led to what we're doing today, educating our people on different subjects like not Hispanic, not Latino, the identity, colonialism. How I found out about the Mexica movement was through a mural that I began at a high school in Boyle Heights, East LA. And there I was, I met up with a friend from high school who happened to walk by the mural and basically told me about the Mexica movement. I did not know about the Mexica movement. I was aware of some history, but I wasn't aware of a lot of history, of the total history, of the real history of our people, and what really matter as far as the things that we got to filter out, and like this whole bogus 16 de Septiembre, Mexican independence. So for me, meeting up with this friend, I ended up borrowing one of his the Mexica handbook written by Olin, and that was an awakening for me. That woke me up to the reality of our colonized condition, the reality of our true history, of our identity, and from there it's been, for me at least, it began the real awakening of who I was as a Nican Tlaca person. We're going to get to the issue of Nican Tlaca as well, what Nican Tlaca is. But basically, it gave me a lot of pride in who I was. And for that, I want to introduce Olin also.
My name is Olin Tezcatlipoca. I'm the director and founder of Mexica Movement, Nican Tlaca Nation. And the issue of identity is the main issue of why we had to start the organization. Because in the 1970s, we began to see a little bit of this Hispanic thing. And then by the 1980s, Hispanic was all over the place. You don't call yourself Mexican anymore. And then And then people were basically proving that Hispanic was wrong. And then they came up with Latino. Then they started using Latino. And during that time, I met a man named Joe Sanchez, who was my mentor. And between him and myself, we started doing mail outs to politicians, to business people, explaining why Hispanic was wrong. And if anything, people wrote back defending the use of Hispanic, why it was about unity. And out of that, I got the idea that most of our people don't know very much about the history, even when you explain to them, what the different terms are, because our people can hear us being described as today in the Hispanic community, there was a gathering of about 20 Latinos who wanted to bring up this issue in the same sentence. And so a lot of this is very illogical. And we went on to develop a poster that said Mexican, not Latino, not Hispanic. And it explained a little bit more of the reasons why these were racist labels on our people, that they were trying to deny us our Mexican identity. And from there, we ended up developing the organization that's called Mexica Movement, Nican Tlaca Nation to this day.
Hello, my name is Notlal Alwea Gamina, and I've been a member of Mexican Movement, Nican Tlaca Nation for almost 5 years now. Today I'm going to talk about why we're not Latin, Latino, Latina, Latinx. The word Latin derives from the Latin language, which is the language of the Romans, today, which is Italy. And during the Roman Empire, they spread their Latin language and their culture through Southern Europe. And today, when our people identify as Latin or Latino or Latina or Latinx, they're basically identifying themselves as a white person or a Southern European. And if that's being forced on us through media and basically everything in our lives, which we don't control, that's actually an act of genocide by denying us our true identity and who we really are and telling us that we're someone that we're not.
Hi, this is Nawi Huitzilopochtli, and I met the Mexica movement in 1997 in a powwow. What attracted me to the Mexica movement was a poster, the classic poster, Mexican, not Latino, not Hispanic poster. I've seen the wording before from a band called Brujeria, but I thought the band Brujeria was the original until I saw the poster and I went up to the booth at East LA Powwow, and it was called Recognizing the Borders. And I asked about the poster, and then they told me that they were the Mexica movement and they're the ones that are the creators of this information. And during that time, I met Olin, and he told me that he's the one who developed the poster. And ever since then, I've been getting more information about our identity and history. And then I learned, who are the real Latinos? Because I seen the shirt because it said Latinos are the white people of Latin America. But, like when I started talking to him, he broke it down more. Olin broke it down more that, the Latinos are the Southern Europeans, the French, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, and the Italians. And I started doing research, and the persons or the people that spoke Latin were the Romans. And the Romans are from a place called Italy now. And out of the Latin languages come Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian. So, and then I started, like, why are we calling ourselves Latino? Latino has nothing to do with us as Mexican people. And I started identifying as Indigenous or Mexica because, I'm Mexican. So from the word Mexican comes from Mexica. And then like, we would like I would start going with Mexica movement, different events. And then we were educate or try to inform people on why we're not Latino or why we're not Hispanic. But it's very hard because every day you hear it in the media, on the schools, on the Mecha meetings or Chicano studies, you know, they're pushing Latino. And you start to realize that, you know, the people that benefit most are actually white people from, like, let's say the Cubanos from Miami. They profit from this word Latino because, you know, like people start buying so-called Latino products, and then the Cubanos from Miami own these companies, and all the money is all the money of our profits, all the money from our communities going to them. And the Mexicans, like, you know, where's our companies? Where's our, where's our, like, money going to, you know? So we, like I said, we go to different events, and like we did get a lot of resistance, especially from Chicana professors from different universities. And they start saying, "Oh, we're all Latinos because it brings out unity, and we're just a blend of different races from so-called Latin America." And we're just saying, no, we're not. You know, our ancestors is Nican Tlaca, or also known as indigenous people from this continent. And then Olin would recommend the books, and then, you know, I would start reading the books, and then you find out that our ancestors had cities, universities, we had books. We're the most educated people on the world during that time.
And of course, the term that we've all been used to now for decades, but again, for those of you who are young, I'm 71 years old. For those of you who are young, you're not aware that at one point, the term Hispanic didn't even exist for our people. Latin didn't exist, or Latino or Latina, and definitely not Latinx. These are all new terms. But if you're young, they seem like they've always been there. It's been a genocidal act all along. But it started with this whole thing about Hispanic. And it's real simple. If you go to a dictionary, say from 1970 or 1960, it's very clear. Hispanic refers to the people, the language, the things of Spain. Why call us? We're not the people of Spain. Spanish is not our natural language. And we don't have the Spanish culture in a natural way as part of who we are. So Hispanic is totally a fraud for us to be calling ourselves Hispanic. We're not Spaniards. And for those of you who say, well, I can't deny my Spanish blood. Well, it's something that you won't hear from the Jews. The Jews don't say, well, I can't deny my German blood. Because they have, you know, Goldsteins and Silverstein and all of these different Jewish names are actually German names. And they have German blood. But again, they don't let that define them. The Spaniards themselves have the blood of, starting with the Iberian people of Spain, and then with the Latin invaders, or the Romans, and then you had the Germanic invaders of the north, and then you had the Arabs invaders from the south. You never hear Spaniards say, well, I can't deny my German blood. I can't deny my Arab blood. I can't deny my Celtic blood, because there were also Celts in Spain. No, they just say they're Spaniards. So, you know, actually, it's rare to hear a Spaniard actually call themselves Hispanic. I'm Antonio Banderas, and I'm an Hispanic. Actually, he calls himself a Latino. According to the Vendido definition, Vendido say that Latinos are from Latin America. Antonio Banderas is from Spain. So they get all of these things mixed up. But with the main issue is just don't say Mexican. Who does that benefit?
That's right.
Hispanic just means Spaniard. And I'm not a Spaniard. Our people of not just Mexico, but the rest of this continent who are Nican Tlaca indigenous people, mixed blood or full blood, we're not Hispanic or Latino or Latinx. We are Nican Tlaca, the people of this continent, Semanahuac. Again, when the police are looking for an Hispanic, 5'8", early 20s, they're not looking for Ricky Martin. They're not looking for whoever from Spain with the name Gonzalez. They're looking for a Nican Tlaca looking person. Or in the old days, like you're saying, they would say, looking for a light-skinned Mexican in their early 20s, 5'8", be on the lookout, blah, 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 blah. And they actually, to this day, they still don't use Latino, and they're definitely not going to use Latinx. They stick, the majority of them stick Hispanic.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's just like if you go back to the I guess some of the literature that all these like vendidos push or even vendidos of the 60s. Like if you look at one of the videos by Moctezuma Esparza during the walkouts in East LA, you look at their even by their own words back then, there's no Hispanic or Latino. The thing that they're referring to is Mexicanos. Los Mexicanos, and you can look at those videos, they're on YouTube. If you go back to the writings of Occupied America by I keep forgetting his name,
Rudy Acuña.
The older the first edition of Occupied America, try to find if it is Hispanic or Latino. When they do refer to Hispanic or Latino, they refer to the Europeans of the Europeans that occupy this continent, like meaning the criollos down in Argentina, the criollos in Mexico. They don't refer to our people as the Hispanics or Latinos.
Yeah, when they were referring to the criollos, they would use the word Hispanos, the Hispanos, which just meant the Spaniards.
Right. So I think that's the other thing where we got to keep in mind that a lot of this stuff is used to keep us at a colonial state of mind where our interests are for the people that control these terms, like but really don't use them. Like, for example, the Cubans or los Cubanos de Miami. Here we are thinking that us as one Mayan who speaks pure Mayan, or one Zapoteco that just speaks Zapoteco, he has a lot in common with un Español, un Nordic Spaniard looking guy, or un peninsular looking Spaniard. We have nothing in common with these people, except that they've been occupying us, and now we're parroting all these terms like Hispanic and Latino, like nothing, like nothing's happening, everything's cool, we are Hispanic, we are Latino. No, we're not. We have a profound and rich culture and identity that we don't have to rely on those terms. We have our own identity, our own terms.
Yeah, except that the problem is that the media, whether it's television, the magazines, the newspapers, radio, they're all promoting Hispanic Latino. And now with this new one of Latinx. But over the last, at least the last 4 decades, it's been Hispanic Latino. And this started initially by the Cubans, started promoting this in Miami because they wanted to control Spanish language television, which they eventually did. But not just Spanish language television, they controlled the magazines in Spanish. They controlled all media, basically. And they're basically telling Washington and telling the world, we want to call ourselves Latinos. But basically it gets back to this guy, Bibi Rebozo, from the 70s with Nixon. He was a buddy of his who was a Cubano. And Bibi Rebozo would be with Nixon, and they would call him Mexican. And for him, that was an insult. He didn't want to be called Mexican because Mexican just means Indian. In a sense, he's right, but obviously Mexicans are not from India. He convinced them to switch the census over to Hispanic in 1980. And that was the point where arrancó. It's like fire everywhere, including our own people. They wanted to disassociate themselves from the term Mexican. What we were trying to do in the 60s, we were trying to get away from the term Mexican American. That's where Chicano came in. They used the term Chicano. But the worst of all of this was not so much really the Cubans. It was the so-called leadership of our people, meaning the writers. We had very few writers, but they were influential on our people. You get all, name a writer right now that you know. They're all promoting the Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx. Yeah. They are more criminal really than the Cubans in Miami were promoting this. Even we talked about Rudy Acuña. Yeah, his first book, Occupied America, it talked about Chicanos and Mexicans and all of that. It was a really good book. That was the first edition. But with each edition, it got more vendido till the latest edition. It's the Latinos. Everything is Latino to him. You got Cisneros, who's a writer, a poet, and all this. She's got this big old tattoo that she's proud of that says Latina on it. You can go on to all of these other writers, basically the influencers before there was YouTube and all that. These people have been influencing not just our own people, but the bigger media to use that. Because when I was growing up in the 60s, the term that they used about was Mexican American. The Mexican American this, Mexican American. You hardly ever hear that term anymore.
Right. I mean, at least there was a Mexican element in there, but obviously, we're not American because, of the history of where America stands as, meaning Americo, from Americo Vespucci, who was a cartographer who wrote his name on the maps drawn up by Europeans when they're initially occupying our lands. So that's the other term that we reject also, American or Americano or I mean, Mexican American, at least it's a little bit, ties you to the Mexican or Mexica, but yeah, that's the other term that we also must reject.
One of the many people that we protested over the years was Eddie Olmos, and he wrote a book called Americanos. And he was trying to promote Americanos as an identity, not just for the Mexicans, but all of the Spanish-speaking areas of Latin America. And obviously that didn't work for him. But other people have promoted other concepts like Iberian American. So it talks about the Iberian Peninsula of Spain and Portugal, and American, because our lands are America. Yeah, I'm an Iberian American. That one I heard a little bit in the 60s, but that didn't take off. But the bigger reason why Hispanic and Latino and Latin and all of that took off was because of Spanish language media. It was using it and promoting it, and people were just parroting what they heard. And the same reason why I hear people about I question them about why they're watching novelas, and say, well, it's the only thing we can watch. If there was something else, I would watch something else. But meanwhile, I got novelas, so get out of here. I'm going to watch my novela. And of course, it's poisonous, racist stuff that they're watching. So our people don't really have a choice on the knowledge of our history. They don't have a knowledge on what their identity is. They don't have a choice in terms of being proud of who we are as a Nican Tlaca people, as an indigenous people. Yeah, well, there's a lot of confusion. It's kind of like with this last election with Trump, we had all these vendidos of our people saying Latinos for Trump. But then you go see the stuff with the Cubans in the Miami area. They didn't say Latinos for Trump. They said Cuban. We're the majority of the so-called Latinos. But then again, it's kind of the use of the term Latino or Hispanic. You know, it's not Latino Americans like African Americans. It's not Hispanic Americans or Latino Americans. They're not using it. And then, but you can be a Latino supposedly if you're in Madrid or if you're in Panama or you're in Argentina or you're a Maya in Mexico or some kid in East LA. You're all Latinos. The logic of that doesn't work. Doesn't work for Hispanic or Latino. But then even if we were called Hispanic Americans, that would be a lie. We're called Latino Americans. But then again, you got the Jews. The Jews never call themselves Jewish Americans. They don't have a need to call themselves Jewish Americans. You ever hear of a Jew saying, well, I'm Jewish American? Well, I'm Jewish, or I'm a Jew. It's real clear because they're very proud of who they are.
And I think that's what it is, Olin. The fact that we as a Nican Tlaca people, we who have been under occupation, we who have been misinformed, uninformed, at school, they pushed us around as kids, as children, as like being, you know, coming from a distorted culture or not even a culture, because I remember as a kid, the only pages that they talked about is in history class was only like several pages. They only talk about the Mexican Revolution. Our parents do not know history. Our parents do not, you know, have the time to or even push some knowledge in our people. We talk about books. Books. Sometimes the only book that was in our homes was like the Bible. Nothing related to our history, obviously, but the history of the Jewish people.
And on that note, you're talking about the history. That's what we're going to do with our next dialogue. We're going to talk about history and why it's important, and the history that we don't know, and the history that we should know, and what's the most important part of our history. And that's what we're going to deal with in our next of these dialogues. Thank you for being with us.